There is one bit of Linux tech that you can have an issue with that I don't think anybody is going to complain about. That is Dbus. Dbus is kinda bad. And before we get to the main thing I want to talk about today, I just want to show you a Linus Torvalds email from 2015. This is before the untorvaldsing. So there are some words here that I can't read on YouTube. In response to someone saying, can you opine as to whether you think that Dbus should be merged? I don't mean whether you'd accept a pull request that Greg may or may not send during this merge window. I mean whether you think that Dbus should be merged if it had appropriate review and people were okay with the implementation. So I am still expecting to merge it, mainly for a rather simple reason. I trust my maintainers, and Greg in particular, so when a major maintainer wants to merge something, that pulls a lot of weight with me. That said, I have to admit to being particularly disappointed with the performance argument for merging it, having looked at the Dbus performance and come to the conclusion that the reason Dbus performs abysmally bad is just pure shit user space code. I am not at all impressed by the performance argument. We don't merge kernel code just because user space was written by... Again, I can't read this by a, we'll say, monkey on crack. Kernel code has higher standards, and yes, this also means that it tends to perform better. But no, user space is shit is not a valid reason for pushing things into the kernel. Oh, how I love younger Linus Torvalds. This isn't even that young, it's just 10 years ago. There is something we have truly lost on Linux by not having this in the kernel anymore. Now, this email is just one particularly notable example. There are many, many other such cases with very notable developers just hating Dbus. And everyone kinda knows this. That's why distros like Arch Linux don't use the reference implementation of Dbus, and a lot of other distros don't do it either. They use Dbus Broker, but at its core, it is still just Dbus. It is just a different implementation of the same specification. The main issue with trying to do anything else is we're not in the early 2000s anymore. Dbus isn't new. It is heavily, heavily ingrained into how we do things on Linux. Any sort of change at this point would be incredibly difficult. At least without doing something like Hyprwire has done, where it has the pulse audio compatibility, the ULSA compatibility, the jack compatibility. I think there's GStreamer in there somewhere. It has all of these different plugins that make all of these things work on the main thing. If you were to just get rid of Dbus, that wouldn't work. But maybe you can do a slow migration. You build something new, you build something potentially better, and then slowly move things over. Do I think that is actually going to happen? No, not really. Do I think it is a waste of time to try? Also no, and that is why the Hyprland developer is doing exactly that. Dbus is a disgrace to the Linux desktop, and that is not even the craziest thing you've heard about Dbus, just in this video. So Dbus was created by GNOME developer Havoc Pennington and released in November of 2006. And because it was very involved in the GNOME project, it quickly saw adoption, and then when GNOME started using it, it kind of made sense for others to start using it as well, and it became what it is today, where lots of the Linux desktop kind of relies on it being there. As a service, Dbus is incredibly handy and useful, and overall, I believe the idea should absolutely be used by more apps. However, the implementation on the other hand. So, what is Dbus? You've probably heard the name. You probably, if you installed something like Arch Linux, thought about a different package for it, but what actually is Dbus? What does it do? Dbus' idea is pretty simple. Let applications, services, and other things expose methods or properties in a way that other apps can find them in one place on the bus. Let's say we have a service that monitors the weather. Instead of each app knowing how to talk to each weather service, or even worse, implementing one itself, it can connect to the bus and see if any service on the system exposes some weather API, then use it to get the weather. Basically, it's for IPC. inter-process communication. It is a generic system for applications on your system to go and communicate with each other without having to go and do something custom for that specific application. Now, on Linux, Dbus is not the first of its kind, but for a long time now has kind of been the standard on the desktop. I say desktop because there are things outside the desktop. Before Dbus was around, we kind of had a problem, because GNOME had their own thing, that being Corba, and KDE also had their own thing, that being Dcop. Dcop is the basis for what Dbus ended up becoming, but having these different communication systems means that applications between your different environments either have to have a solution for the other desktop environment, or just not work correctly outside of your DE, let alone then being on a window manager, and you have a whole other mess. Having one generic solution just makes things easier. And I've mentioned it in a few videos lately, Binder. Binder is what is used on Android. Now, this is upstreamed into the Linux kernel. There is no reason why you couldn't build something off of Binder for the Linux desktop. And in regards to the post that I'm talking about now, some people have mentioned, hey, why do your own thing instead of doing Binder? He hasn't really given a proper answer to that, mainly just he hasn't looked into that. Now, let's say you do have multiple buses and you do want to support multiple of them with your application. You can absolutely do that. But even if you do support them, firstly, that introduces more code complexity because each of the buses is going to work slightly differently. Secondly, maybe they don't support all of the same things you want to be using, so you got to do some weird workarounds for it. And thirdly, because of that, and just generally because of supporting more things, you might introduce subtle bugs that only occur with specific kinds of buses. So what went wrong? Dbus is a lenient, unorganized, and forgiving bus. Those three add to one of the biggest fundamental and conceptual blunders to any protocol, language, or system. The most important blunders are: objects on the bus can register whatever they want, objects on the bus can call whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want. The protocol allows, and even in a sense incentivizes, vendor-specific, unchecked garbage. And whilst this can create a weird, unorganized mess, this is also part of the benefit of Dbus. It makes very little assumptions about what you're trying to do with it. Maybe to some extent, too few assumptions. Now, one big problem is Linux has a lot of developers. That is something that no one can deny. However, a lot of people don't like writing documentation. And, well, Dbus is absolutely no exception on that front, and there are quite a few gaps in the documentation that have been there for a very long time that no one has tried to deal with, things that should be marked as, like, complete, that like, there's like, to-dos for basic functionality. So it's kind of like everybody has made their implementation, and then everybody who wants to make a new implementation just bases their implementation off of the old implementation, trying to do things better, but there's just random gaps in the documentation. Now, most of the documentation is fine, don't get me wrong, but something this critical that's been around for this long shouldn't just have to-dos on basic things. It would be one thing if Dbus was new, okay? Understandable. But it's been around for going on 20 years now. We're a little bit past having to-dos in the documentation. Okay, let's say we have a standard and we understand it. Great. Even if you read a spec, nothing, literally nothing, guides, ensures, or helps you stick to it, nothing. You send anonymous calls with whatever you want thrown in. Let me tell you a story. Back when I was writing XDG desktop portal Hyprland, I had to use a few Dbus protocols. XDG portals runs on Dbus to implement some of the communication. If we go to the portal documentation, we can find the protocols. Great, so I implemented it. It worked more or less. Then I implemented restore tokens, which allow the app to restore its previously saved configuration, and here Dbus falls apart. None of the apps, I repeat, none followed the spec. I wrote a spec-compliant mechanism and nothing used it. Why? Simple. They used a different spec, which came out of nowhere. I legit couldn't find a single doc with it. What I ended up doing was I looked at KDE, which already had an implementation, and then did that. Now, this is not entirely accurate, and he does correct himself a bit later in the post. Mako over on Hacker News said, the portal docs are actually correct, you were just reading the wrong ones. Yes, he actually was. However, the docs are poorly separated such that I could not easily find that information. The names of things for app to portal and portals to app implementation are different. Why? Who knows? The website he links didn't exist, or at least in its current state, back when he was writing that portal, and most importantly, Dbus allows you to do whatever, while a real protocol would enforce the types outright and forbid invalid usage. Standards Part 3. Let me just say one word, variants. Half of Dbus protocols have either this BS or some array of string plus a variant passed somewhere. Putting something like this, even allowing that in a core spec, should be subject to a permanent ban from creating software. What this allows and even incentivizes is for apps to send random shit over the wire and hope the other side understands it. This has been tried many times, most notably in X with Atoms, and has time and time again proven to only bring disaster. Now, permissions. This is one that comes up quite a bit when talking about Wayland. Have you ever heard of permissions? Neither have Dbus developers. Dbus is as insecure as it gets. Everybody sees everything and calls whatever. If the app doesn't have a specific security mechanism, cowabunga it is. Furthermore, there is no such thing as a rejection in a universal sense. Either the protocol invents its own rejection, or just something happens. This is one of the prime reasons Flatpak apps cannot see your session bus. So, for Flatpaks to access your session bus, what they're doing is actually going through a proxy called XDG Dbus proxy, because if they could just access everything, this would just delete the sandboxing that you have with Flatpaks. Basically, you're not going to fix Dbus, so leave Dbus to be the state it's in, and let's create this new packaging format that makes use of a filtered proxy so that we can at least somewhat get a permission system here. Why do we care about permissions? Well, one of the things that uses Dbus is K-Wallet and GNOME keyring, that thing on your system that stores secrets, stores passwords, and various other things you want to keep private. So, you would think they are secure. Well, the secrets can be encrypted on disk, which technically prevents them from being stolen if your laptop is stolen. But any app on the bus can read all secrets in the store if the store is unlocked. No, this is not a joke. Once you input that password, any app can just read all of them without you noticing. So the point of the store, and this has been stated by a KDE developer, is to protect your passwords, protect your secrets, whilst the laptop is unattended, whilst the system is unattended. Protecting it from other applications on your system, well, this issue was reported to GNOME developers a long time ago because there was a CVE back in 2018. He's still not fixed this link. What is this link? Why is... What? How did you make the link do that? CVE 2018-1935-8. GNOME keyring through 3.28.2 allows local users to retrieve login credentials via a secret API call and the Dbus interface if the keyring is unlocked. A similar issue to CVE 2008-7320. One perspective is that this occurs because available Dbus protection mechanisms are not used. Note, the vendor disputes this because according to the security model, untrusted applications must not be allowed to access the user's session bus socket. Basically, the argument is, yeah, we know the problem is there, yeah, we know the problem exists, but untrusted applications should be run in a sandbox so as to not allow them to access the entire bus. Which is fine if you install the application. It's not fine if you install something malicious. I've had enough of Dbus in my apps. I would greatly benefit from a session and later system bus for my ecosystem, but I will not stand the absolute shitfest that Dbus is. That is why I've decided to take matters into my own hands. I am writing a new bus from the ground up with zero copying, interop, or other recognition of Dbus. Now, he does mention in the FAQ at the bottom that if people want to go and build plugins to bring in Dbus support, that is totally fine. It's just not something that is part of the core project. There are so many stupid ideas crammed into Dbus that I do not wish to have any of them poison my own. And of course, a lot of people are going to point to XKCD 927. This is the one about competing standards, and this is not used in the most accurate way 99% of the times. When we're talking about Wayland and X11, these aren't run together. These are directly competing with each other. So yeah, that would apply in that context. But when you're talking about a bus, there's no reason why you can't run multiple. Yeah, Dbus is the main thing, but you can run Dbus and the new thing at the same time and slowly shift things over. It's not trying to directly replace it. The first thing he focused on was Hyprwire, and the link for that one actually does work. This is inspired by how Wayland decided to handle things. Its most important strengths are consistency. The wire itself enforces types and message arguments. No array of strings with variants. No just send me something. Simplicity. The wire protocol is fast and simple. Nobody needs complicated struct types. These just add annoyances. And speed. Fast handshakes and protocol exchanges, connections are established very quickly. And this is already being used in some of the Hyprland infrastructure, Hyperpaper, Hyperlauncher, and some parts of HyperCTL. So that was the transfer protocol. Then you have the bus itself that actually manages the transferring. This is called Hyprtavern. Does this link work? Yes, he manages to make his own links work, but not the documentation ones. Apps register objects on the bus, which have exposed protocols and key properties defined by the protocols. These objects can be discovered by other apps connecting to the bus. In a sense, Hyprtavern acts like a tavern. Sure, where each app is a client that can advertise the language they speak, but also go up to someone else and strike up a conversation if they have a language in common. Some overall improvements over Dbus in no particular order: permissions baked in spec permissions, suitable for exposing to sandbox applications by default. So rather than seeing the entire bus, you can only see the things that you're allowed to see, like a permission system should work. Strict protocols. Don't know the language, don't poison the wire. Worth noting, this does not stop you from making your own extensions, it just enforces you to stay in spec. Simplified API. Dbus has a lot of stupid ideas, shout out broadcast, that we intentionally do not inherit. Way better defaults. The core spec also includes a few things that are optional in Dbus, like an actually secure key value store. That being Hyprtavern KV. A key value store is you have a key, you can use it to access a value. You have a different key, you access a different value. Need I say more? This is essentially what the Dbus Secrets API does, but instead of being a security joke, it's actually secure by design. Any app can register secrets, which only it can read back. Secrets cannot be enumerated. This means that when usebin Firefox sets a password superwebsite.com equals anime booba, an app called downloads totally legit shell script cannot see the value or the key or that Firefox even set anything. This also will work with Flatpak, Snap, and app image applications by additionally using their Flatpak ID, Snap ID, or app image path respectively. This is not yet implemented, but planned. Now, of course, it would require support from that ecosystem or some sort of plugin to interact with the way that Dbus is handling things, which good luck with that one. Good luck with that one. But assuming that could be done, it would be suitable for use for that. And he understands the position that this is in. It is not likely that this is going to be widely adopted anytime soon. but also he didn't think that Hyprland itself would be widely adopted. And by the end of this month, it is likely going to be the most popular window manager on Arch Linux. So, whilst it might not have been likely, it already happened to one of the things he built. Will it happen with this? Who knows? Again, Dbus is so ingrained into what people are doing that moving to anything else, very unlikely. Also, this is very new. There's not documentation for it yet because it's basically just been started. So any sort of migration to it is going to be long down the line. But what he is doing is using it inside of the Hyprland ecosystem as an example of how it can be done. Which, at least to me, sounds very reminiscent of what was done with Dbus. Use inside of GNOME, show how it can be done, and then over time, if it proves to be a good tech, others will adopt it. Will they adopt this one? I don't know. I don't have a time machine. One important thing for adoption, though, is actually being able to use it. So, Vaxery is a C++ developer, so everything is written in C++. However, it shouldn't be that complicated to make bindings for other languages like Rust, Go, Python, if somebody's experienced with those languages. Again, those don't yet exist, and if they do exist, will be somewhere down the line, but at some point. And if somebody wants to re-implement the spec and then make it in Rust, hey, they can do that as well. So, let me know your thoughts. Do you think this is going to go anywhere outside of the Hyprland ecosystem? Because it will be adopted within the Hyprland ecosystem. That's already happening. That is already guaranteed to be done. But outside of that, do you think that other environments are going to adopt it? Do you think it's going to be just a thing here? I'd love to know. Let me know your thoughts down below. Go subscribe as well. If you liked the video, go like the video. I said that, didn't I? Yeah, if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribers daily bearer pay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and we'll see.